to get down to business? Join seasoned entrepreneur, community leader, and Army veteran Scott Shalom Klein, who will take you behind the scenes with those who work in America's small business scene and speak with leaders making an impact, creating jobs, and telling their story in entrepreneurship. So let's get down to business. On AM 560, The Answer, here's your host, Shalom Klein.
And indeed, we are all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship and business. We talk all about small business here. You are listening to Get Down to Business. I'm your host, Shalom Klein. Remember, you can always download podcasts on my website at syklein.com. And while you are there, be sure to check out using your favorite podcast app. Make sure you subscribe and leave a comment to make it even easier for others to find Get Down to Business once again on your favorite podcast app. So kicking off our program today is an expert dedicated to helping people simplify their retirement planning so they can stop worrying and start truly living. Our guest is Patrick Negado, a financial professional specializing in retirement income and wealth transfer. Patrick focuses on strategies for efficient asset growth, lifetime retirement income, and tax-efficient wealth transfer. His unique approach turns confusing financial jargon into easy-to-understand concepts, which he lays out in his new book, The Canoe and the Current, Rethinking Retirement So You Can Stop Worrying and Start Living Today. Patrick's he's here to share his insights on how to build a predictable, worry-free financial future. Welcome, Patrick.
Thanks, Shalom. I'm glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
It is great to have you. Absolutely. Your book uses that analogy, the canoe and the current. I love it. Can you explain the meaning behind that title and how that analogy helps people shift their mindset about retirement planning?
Yeah. So basically what happened was I was visiting with a client who thought he had it made, and he kind of really did, but he was still unconfident and felt like, what if I run out? And the whole canoe and the current metaphor kind of came to me at that moment. And I said, well, imagine if we had a canoe and we built that canoe right with essentially you're making sure you get guaranteed income for your essentials. I kind of use that as the analogy. And then the current will be the stock market, right? So people are afraid of the stock market because the current can get rough sometimes, and sometimes it's too smooth and too slow. So the idea behind it is if we built you a solid enough canoe, you could withstand the current when it's rough, but you can also ride it smoothly because you'll have your essentials covered through the guaranteed income through the canoe portion. So that's essentially how I came up with a metaphor, and it helped the client really understand the concept a little bit better and realize, yes, because one of the things that happens when people retire essentially is they stop getting a paycheck, right? And so if we can replicate that using the canoe concept, then we make sure they have a guaranteed income so that they can continue to invest their money confidently and not lose the ability to grow it.
Patrick, you focus on lifetime retirement income. What's the single biggest mistake that people make today when trying to calculate or ensure that they won't outlive their money?
I think the biggest single mistake people do is they do not calculate what their essentials are. They kind of just wing it. They don't determine what their expenses are going to be at retirement. They wing it. And I think the other thing that I've also noticed is people retire blindly. So I've developed this other thing called the retirement vision statement. If you can kind of visualize and ask yourself, what do I want my retirement to look like? Then perhaps you can then prioritize your money to ensure that like I said, the main thing is getting sure your essentials are covered, because the one thing that's not going to come back is a paycheck from your employer. Right. So if we can replace that, whether it's Social Security, hopefully if you still have pensions, then pension, and maybe using other structured investment products and or annuities, then you can replicate the paycheck you used to get and essentially have a plan for that. So people retire blindly is the biggest mistake. They do not necessarily calculate what their main essentials are. And so the first thing we always do is, what is it that you're going to need just to live on? And then let's pad that by a few $100s.
Yeah. And for our audience of entrepreneurs and small business owners, what's the most tax efficient retirement savings vehicle that they should be utilizing right now that many actually overlook?
Well, I think it's the Roth IRA is probably the main thing. As most entrepreneurs, when they're talking to their CPAs or accountants' main objective is to help them save on taxes today. And so they'll generally have a SEP IRA or a simple plan to basically have tax deductible dollars. However, the problem with that is it's eventually a tax trap in the future when a lot of people expect taxes to increase in the future. And I think the Roth IRA tends to be a little bit underutilized from the standpoint that your accountant's job is to help you save money on taxes today, not necessarily in the future. So in my opinion, the Roth IRA is probably underutilized for entrepreneurs.
Interesting, and that's great advice. Once again, we're chatting with Patrick Negado. He is the author of The Canoe and the Current, Rethinking Retirement So You Could Stop Worrying and Start Living. We are learning a lot from Patrick in this conversation, and I'm super excited to continue to explore. So, Patrick, what is the core difference between efficient asset growth and simply aggressive asset growth? And why is efficiency more important as someone nears retirement?
Well, there's a thing in our business, a terminology called sequence of returns. So if you just happen to catch a bad sequence of returns, that will completely affect your retirement income and how your retirement assets are going to last. So efficient asset growth is essentially making sure that we do not necessarily sacrifice equity exposure, but rather use structured investments to help you still stay invested in equities while protecting your downside. Right? There are investment products out there that will allow you to invest 100% in equities and protect a portion of your downside. So I think from that standpoint, you don't have to necessarily go by the old rules of switching your allocation from 100% equities to 60-40, as an example. That's kind of like a big thing back in the early 90s where you switch your holdings to 60% equities and 40% bonds. And that may help you sleep better at night, but it's not necessarily going to help you. They're not going to help your assets last you a lifetime, because you now have to plan to live anywhere between 30 to even as much as 40 years once you're retired. People are just living longer.
Absolutely. And you specialize in tax-efficient wealth transfer strategies. What's one simple strategy a family can implement now to ensure that their assets pass to the next generation with minimal tax burden?
Well, I think the main thing you want to do, probably the easiest and simplest thing, is having a living trust. 30 years ago, it didn't take much to be taxed by the government when it came to estate taxes, but nowadays you and your wife could be worth $30 million and you're going to pay minimal estate taxes. But the main thing you want to really avoid, if you're not at that level, are probate costs. And essentially a living trust takes care of that. I'll tell you a quick story. I had a client recently who took care of his mother until the day she passed away. And she passed away last Christmas. And to this day, he's still taking care of, he's still handling the probate process, and he hasn't quite settled her estate. And it's the little things like that. Had she just had a living trust and had it set up properly, everything would have been settled a few months after her death. But to this day, he is still taking care of some of the things through the probate process. And it's not cheap.
Interesting. The market, we know, Patrick, is always changing. How should individuals adjust their retirement income strategy to account for factors like inflation and market uncertainty without sacrificing their quality of life? So
I'm really big on index investing. I think that, most money managers can't really beat the indexes anyway. So what I generally like to do is, like I said, there are newer products out there, newer investment structures where you can invest in the index, have some downside protection so that you will have a time frame, for instance, 15-month investment, 24-month investment, where you can have the majority of the S&P 500 returns, and then they're going to protect you from anywhere between negative 10 to negative 20% during that time frame. And you just keep rolling that over until the next one, until you're really ready to start drawing income from it. And then at that point, we can look at income products, income strategies to make sure that you get the income you need for retirement.
Absolutely fascinating. I'm chatting with Patrick Negado, a financial professional specializing in retirement income and wealth transfer. Again, also the author of a new book, The Canoe and the Current, Rethinking Retirement So You Could Stop Worrying and Start living. Patrick, I want to make sure our listeners can find the book and get in touch with you. How can they do so?
Yes, thank you. canoeandcurrent.com would be a good website to go to. You can also reach me if you'd like to, and this is where it's a little bit different. My email is info@canoeandthecurrent.com. So I ended up getting both URLs, so I apologize. So canoeandcurrent.com if you want a little bit more background on the book. And then if you want to email me, info@canoeandthecurrent.com.
I know that there's a lot of financial jargon that sometimes even professionals can consider very jargony. But what's one thing that you find most, I guess, annoying, and how do you translate that concept into something that's clear and usable?
Well, I'd say maybe the most annoying thing to me is you have different financial advisors who may have different objectives. And then instead of perhaps highlighting and looking at what's right about what somebody's doing, they start to demonize what perhaps another financial advisor has done. We're all competitive. We're all competing for assets. And sometimes some of us act in a way that's kind of inappropriate to just try to win that business. That makes our industry look bad, unfortunately. But I always try to highlight. Let's look at this. I look at it from my as an example, as my dentist. Before I saw my current dentist, which I've been seeing for 30 years, I saw a different dentist. And then when she was examining my teeth or my gums, she noticed some things that she didn't quite agree with. She did not say anything bad about the other guy, but I noticed through her reaction that she didn't quite agree with that procedure. So I took a lesson from that. If I don't necessarily agree with somebody's recommendation, I'll talk about what makes it work, and I'll say this might be the reasons why it won't work, and then ask the client how they feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know in today's digital environment, there's a lot of financial misinformation that is out there. So I'm curious, how do you think that we need to weed through that? How do we avoid some of that and filter out some of the retirement advice that folks might see online versus the advice that they really need to receive from a licensed professional?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. There's been a plethora of advertising I've seen on Facebook that basically are saying, you can utilize some financial tools that give you tax-free growth and tax-free income. And that's really utilizing a life insurance policy if it's used appropriately to get those benefits. Unfortunately, that really doesn't happen without proper design, number one. But number two, and more importantly, is a client has to be committed to paying those premiums if they really want it to work. So a great example in recent stories or recent news is Kyle Busch is suing another advisor in the company that he purchased a life insurance policy from. He was essentially sold a tax-free retirement plan, according to him. And I know exactly how that happened, because you had some life insurance agent basically say, I can give you this life insurance policy that has these benefits, which in essence, they do have those benefits. But if it's not structured properly, you end up buying a very expensive life insurance policy and you don't end up getting the money you think you're going to get out of it. At the end of the day, life insurance is life insurance. Investments are investments. That's
Absolutely. And I think that, again, retirement is something that people are paying, it's so important to them. And especially at this time of year, a lot of folks are taking stock of, again, where they're at, maybe looking their accounts pretty carefully. And so if a listener tuning into the program today is, 5 to 10 years away from retirement and still very concerned about their future, and maybe they're going online and they're searching at all those calculators. I know, Patrick, that they're out there. What would you say is the single most important immediate action that they should put into practice in the month ahead that can maybe boost their confidence?
So I think if you're waiting 5 to 10 years, I would suggest keeping it very simple. You can either do your target date funds within what's available if you're a 401k plan, or through some mutual fund company that's offering it. However, what I generally don't like about it is you do sacrifice your returns a little bit because you are starting to scale down on equities. But if you just want to simplify it, I would just say it doesn't hurt to just invest in the S&P 500 index. You have 5 to 10 years. Let it ride. Let the index do its thing. because even when there's a correction, it does tend to recover within 2 to 3 years. And then when you're getting closer to retirement, I would say start to discuss with a professional, how can we then start turning this into a lifetime retirement income, right? And then they will determine what's the appropriate tools to make that happen for you. But I would just say it's 5 to 10 years from retirement if you want to continue to grow as much as you can, because you don't know how long you're going to live, in which case we want to make sure you have as much as possible to work with when you're 3 years out of retirement.
Patrick, on that note, again, a lot of folks are trying to make sure that they're staying tax efficient, and you help people, as we've discussed earlier in the program, achieve tax efficient wealth transfer strategies. What would you say to somebody that maybe is making a decision that they believe is tax efficient, but actually might be intentionally hurting their heirs?
How do you mean by that? Like, what do you have an example that you want to discuss? Or?
Yeah, if somebody makes a decision that ultimately that because of a strategy that they might be picking, maybe a business decision or something like that, that ultimately is going to affect folks that might be inheriting their wealth in the future, is there any advice that you have for them?
Well, I think what tends to happen is people wait to the very last minute to really look into wealth transfer strategies or look at how they're going to transfer. I find most people don't even have a will. So as I said earlier, a living trust would be the first thing you'd want to have in place. And more importantly is once you're retired and let's say you've secured your retirement, I think the next thing you want to do, especially if we're going to include any sort of tax efficient planning, is to kind of determine how you would want your wealth to eventually transfer and who you want to receive it. One of the things I've also developed is developing a family financial philosophy. How did you build your wealth? How would you like to transfer your wealth? And to whom would you like your wealth to go to? It basically helps solidify the values you want to instill to the next generation, right? That way they don't squander the money you've built. At the end of the day, if they can appreciate how you've done it, and you give them the proper tools and ideas to appreciate what you've built, then hopefully they won't squander that wealth, right? Whatever you've built. Once they receive it, they can perhaps treat it the similar way you did. Ultimately, they're going to do with it what they want to do. But if you give them the blueprint of here's how I want the money to be treated, hopefully they will honor your legacy because of that.
Patrick, I've heard you say before that your focus is on helping people stop worrying and start living. So what personal experience or philosophical belief shaped your conviction that peace of mind should be the ultimate goal of financial planning?
Well, I think a lot of people retire, sometimes they overcomplicate things. The other thing is, once you retire, the last thing you want to do is to try to manage your money in a certain way that's going to stress you out. So if you can build the canoe, give you the guaranteed income that you need to pay for your essentials, then the other monies that's invested in the current type of investments, that can be used for your pleasure expenses or for your gifts to your children and grandchildren. In addition to that, as we make money on the current side, because ultimately we will harvest from that and add to the canoe so you're also increasing your canoe income. That's how you can stop worrying at retirement and never have to worry about running out of money, as well as increasing your income to keep up with inflation.
Absolutely. I'm chatting with Patrick Negado, and we're coming to a close in our conversation, but I'm curious, what was that pivotal moment or experience in your career that made you shift from a more conventional financial advising approach to focusing on retirement income and wealth transfer?
Thank you for that question. I actually misunderstood your question initially, but basically when I realized that the 4% off of a 60-40 split, so we're talking financial jargon. So the general idea is as you get older, you want to decrease your stock exposure and increase your bond exposure. And the formula is 60% stocks, 40% bonds, and you take 4% dividend/yield income from that and hopefully never have to touch your principal. Well, that doesn't work. I've run enough analysis to know that it doesn't work. And people do not feel secure knowing that. in today's environment, with what's available in the marketplace, guaranteed income with properly structured annuities can offer you anywhere between 6 to 8% guaranteed income for the rest of your life. So why would settle for 4 when you get 6 to 8?
Yeah, awesome. Patrick, we're at the end of our time. How can we find the book and how can we get in touch?
canoeandcurrent.com, info@canoeandthecurrent.com if you want to email me directly.